I think the biggest news in this world was the Jake Barber interview.
Oh, yes. I've been working with Mr. Barber for a couple of years and knew about his operations. Very little of what he did and knows has come out yet. Very, very little. But that's for reasons we can get into.
Okay. So Jake Barber is an Air Force vet, and a lot of the focus on the story was this egg-shaped craft that he actually came in contact with. This is not someone that was investigating things and so forth. This was actually a first-person encounter with some sort of craft.
No, he was on the retrieval teams officially.
Okay.
Out of Delta Force. And that team, I'll let him say where they operate from. I've been there. They are a team that are contracted to participate in operations to down and retrieve extraterrestrial vehicles or NHI craft. So that is what he and his team did. He was in charge of security and transport for those special operations out at a couple of black sites out in the desert. And I've been to these sites. And so I can speak to more detail about that. But that is actually what he did. It was not an incidental encounter. He was operational for about 20 years at a couple of these sites where that's going on. And I've known of those sites since the early 90s, since before he arrived. And so his operations go back quite some time there. So he became fairly senior over the years. And he went from being in the military to then working, being set up in a corporate entity that contracted and would sort of work with government and aerospace companies to acquire those craft and then get them downed and then retrieve them so they could be handed over to be studied or reverse engineered. So it's a very long and complex story, only part of which is going to come out immediately. We plan the rest of this year. Next year it'll all come out.
So this particular egg spaceship, I guess, is this extraterrestrial?
Yes.
Or is it reverse engineered?
No, that one was ET origin. So, interestingly, he and I talk about this at some length. Right now, unless you're very expert in this area, you're not going to be able to distinguish between a non-human one and a reverse engineered one from Lockheed or Northrop, unless you know what to look for. And even then, the science of studying those technologies and aircraft from other places, that has been going on for 80 years, literally 80 years. So 45 to now. So there's been this, it started out like this, very slow, and then it boom, broke out back around the mid to late 50s forward. There was a huge breakout in how those technologies operate. And people are shocked when I tell them, I have an intel source who is the top scientist at the Naval Research Labs in Washington. It's the largest Department of Defense lab. He was in the vault, as it's called, where a lot of classified things are kept on this subject. And he saw that it was October 1954 that we mastered gravity control. So now imagine you've mastered gravity control. We were fooling around with it prior to, but you mastered it by then. Now, 54 to now is 70 years. So imagine a 70-year technology curve with the brightest minds, scientific minds in the world, recruited high school, college, into those programs, and virtually unlimited black budget funding, right? Trillions of dollars. So what is being flown out there would deceive the president, Senate Intelligence Committee, and this is the problem. So he and I have talked about this. So Jake Barber and I have had these long discussions where even for expert people like his team, often it's very hard to distinguish between one and the other. But this particular object is an egg-shaped object. Those have been reported for a very long time. Now, do we have knockoffs that look similar? Yes. So any shape that you would see that was non-human, we've sort of done a copycat. And that's for false flag operations. So, the public won't know, is it real? It's like the old years ago when there used to be audio tape. Is it real or is it Memorex? Remember that commercial?
Yeah.
Is it real or is it Memorex? Is it an original that's non-human, extraterrestrial, or is it something that has been a facsimile that's been reproduced and which pretty much fool anyone who's not quite expert in the area? And I think in the last 30 years since I've been doing this, the refinement of that technology at almost where, if you look at Michael Herrera's testimony, the Marine who encountered one of these man-made ones in Indonesia, it was so advanced, but then you could tell if you got close to it, it had seams and parts. It was man-made. It's a Lockheed platform. Ones that you see that are triangular, there are ones that are extraterrestrial that are triangular. Most of the ones people see are my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman, or the Raytheon platforms that are triangular. Typically, the Raytheon ones are a little less equilateral. They're a little more elongated. And those, if you look at Stephen Dignan's testimony, it's up on our site, and we actually have it in our new book that just came out. I'm going to show you in a minute. That was at a level where it was almost had a living component. So when we went up and touched it, it kind of purred, reacted. If you look at his testimony, he was out here in California at Fort Irwin in 2000. And that was a Raytheon device. And I would say out of 1 million people, all 1 million people would think that was extraterrestrial. And it wasn't. He and his wife were abducted into it and tortured. But, this is the other part of this whole story that no one gets. I mean, the ufology, it's all the abductions and mutilations. I say, yeah, I've debriefed about 24 guys who've been operational in those programs doing that. So, I'm sorry if you're gullible, but wake the fuck up. Excuse my language. But they ain't happening by the ETs. So most of the information on this is actually part information spun in with disinformation. And this is one of the real problems. And the reason I think it's important to bring this up is that when you're on these retrieval teams, like Jake was on, some of them are at a high enough level they're only retrieving, weird things. Like if you're on a retrieval team and you have a B-2 stealth go down, okay, that is one level of clearance. But it's another world when you start retrieving the man-made UFOs and the ET things. And so you get cleared slowly into that level. And I have a number of folks that we're working with who had that same trajectory. They started out very young, retrieving, a crashed jet, Air Force jet or something that had classified components on it. They all do, sensors and things like that. Be sure they don't fall into enemy hands. But then certain people then get cleared into this other level of exotics, or what's euphemistically called AT, advanced technologies, but super advanced exotic technologies.